Okay, now we're recording. Thank you. Our last lecture, next meeting, your exam, you do not need to connect to Zoom. Just go, start your exam 4:30, and that's it. With that, we finish. Next week, hopefully, after the graders finish and after we review your exams, I am going to be posting an announcement with your final grades. Talking about final grades, I want to use these slides from our lecture one, just to give you a reminder of the things. Your exams, each exam is 25%. You already have your grade from the midterm. You can do the math. Whatever grade you have there is 25% of your final grade. Similar thing is going to happen with your final. Whatever grade you get is going to be 25%, and your assignments and your quizzes are each 25%. So thinking about this, you have most of the numbers here. You have the grades of your assignment, your quizzes, and at least the midterm. You can have a pretty good idea right now, today, about where you are in terms of your final grade. If you are looking for a B+ or a B or an A plus, whatever, the scholarship, your program, any need that you have, any goal, I think you have a pretty good idea, hopefully, about what is the grade that you need in the final in order to accomplish that goal. So my recommendation, check the topics that we're going to mention here. Hopefully the review help you. The review for the midterm is there. You can go and watch at least the video of the midterm review, check your quizzes, check your exams. Remember, it's comprehensive. Any question that you have before in a quiz or in an exam can be there again, just because we use the same poll. Not the same number of questions, but the same polls. So you can have at least one question that maybe is going to be similar or the same. That's something that you have before. So those are the questions that you want to answer correctly, at least the ones that you already know, and prepare for the new ones. Talking about that, your grades, to be more specific, we did 8 assignments, if I remember correctly. So if the assignments are 25% of the total, just to be sure that we know how to calculate this, each assignment, if we did 8, each assignment is kind of 3.125% of your final grade. So if you want to do the average and then apply the 25%, or if you want to calculate one by one, just be aware of these numbers. Any questions that you could have regarding how to calculate this, please contact the TAs. They can help you with the maths of the percentages. I received a couple of emails with people asking about the grading and showing me some kind of, I don't know, different way to handle the numbers. So if you have any question regarding how to calculate weights, please let us know. My recommendation, before the exam. Sometimes people believe that they are going to have an A because they do some crazy calculations, and then you discover that those calculation was wrong, and therefore it's not an A but a C. Yes, that happened. So if you have any question about the calculation, please let us know. I remember that in your quiz at the beginning of the semester, one of the questions was calculating your own grade or calculate a grade for someone. So any question, please do not hesitate to ask. It will be better before your exam, so you have a clear idea of what do you need. You are going to be able, you should be able to review the questions in your midterm and the questions in your quizzes. Questions should be open for you. If by any reason you are not able to solve the questions in the midterm or in the quizzes, my recommendation, contact your TA. They can help you. They can tell you where they are, how to access or review your access, whatever. So do not hesitate to contact the TAs for the questions. Let me be clear. You're going to be able to solve the questions. You're going to be able to solve your answers. So if you answer correctly, you're going to have the correct answer for the question. But if you answer incorrectly, we are not releasing the correct answer. So if you do not answer correctly, my advice, go and search for the correct answer, reviewing the lectures, the slides. Why? Because the following scenario is very, very common. Professor, I have an appeal. In my midterm, I have this question, and I remember that I answered correctly. So I have exactly the same question in my final, exactly the same, and I answered the same. But in my final, I was graded wrong. But in my midterm, I received full credits. So the exam is wrong. Can you fix it? Small changes. I do not want you to memorize answers because of these kind of cases. And believe me, they are pretty common. So instead of memorization, I prefer that you check and review addition, subtraction. Well, those are not the topics for our class, but you get the idea. Use an analogy. No memorization. Hopefully you have the opportunity to review. If you get something correct, well, you have the knowledge. If not, review the topics, review the lectures, review the slides. Also, I mentioned this at the beginning of the semester. I want to mention this again because it's the second scenario in which we receive a lot of appeals. Professor, I study using this tutorial online, superprogramming.com. And according with superprogramming.com, 2 plus 2 is 7. So when I was asked in my exam the question, I put 7 because superprogramming.com. Can I get full credits or partial credits? No. If by any chance you are studying using superprogramming.com, if you have any question, if there is any answer or any information that do not match with the book or with our lectures or the slides or whatever, please ask before the exam. After the exam, this is not an appeal. This is not a reason for asking for points or partial credit. So I mentioned this before. Believe me, happened several times. You do not want to be in this scenario. There is not going to be any change in your grade. So be careful with your sources, please. Going back here. Assignments, 3% each. Quizzes, a little bit more, 4% each. So you can calculate where you are in terms of these percentages. You have access to this, the grades for sure. And then how many points do you need there? For the final exam, what you can expect is something similar to the midterm. Similar, what I mean with similar. Number one, you're going to use Respondus lockdown browser. So now you know for sure the environment. Respondus lockdown browser is going to allow you to access Canvas to take the exam. You'd like a quiz, and you're going to have two kinds of questions. Multiple choice, usually for theoretical questions or selecting the correct answer for a diagram or a source code or whatever. Easy questions. Those questions, the ones that are multiple choice, usually you are going to have 1, 3, 5 points for those kind of questions, the easy ones, 1 to 3. Some of them, even though they are multiple choice, but they are complex, you need to think about a scenario or something, 5 points, depending on your exam. The questions that have more value, obviously, those are the open questions. Open questions about programming, about calculating something, such as the metrics that we reviewed before. Those questions in which you need to write the answer. Metrics, obviously, calculations, source code, programming. We do not review semicolons. You notice that with your midterm, but we review that you put the idea there. Usually, the questions are going to be small. I mean, worst case scenario, you need to write 10 lines. Is something that you can complete in 5 minutes or less. As an average, This is not a promise, but as an average, as you notice this in the midterm, your exam is around 20 questions and about 5 minutes, 3 minutes per question. Usually, for an open question, we consider 1 minute is enough. For an open one, 3 minutes. But there are multiple choice questions that you can answer in less than 30 seconds. You're like, yeah, true, false, whatever. And that gives you more time for the open questions. As you remember, you can move back and forward, so you can complete things and then go back and fix things. You be careful with the submit. That's it. There is a sample exam posted, just like for the midterm. My recommendation, please go and complete the sample exam. It's going to open by the end of the lecture. And the idea is test your system. Even though you used Respondus browser before, be sure to test again. Anything could happen. An update in your Windows, in your Mac, a change in your hardware, a new whatever you connect, and somehow create a problem with the software. So review. You do not want to be 4:30 in our next lecture, starting with your exam and your camera didn't work. Avoid that scenario. Check before the time. So for that, your exam, you know it. I am going to show you questions. I am going to ask you questions, not the ones that you already know. For the ones that you already know, you can review your midterm, you can review the previous review, the video. I am going to focus the conversation today in the new questions, in questions that was not in the midterm. So just to give you an idea. But again, just like the previous one, the review is not comprehensive. I am going to talk you about some ideas, but my recommendation, review your quizzes, your midterm, the slides, or if you miss any lecture, you have the videos. All the videos are available, so you can check there whatever thing you miss. If you have noticed, I am editing the videos and I am trying to include into the video a small title or description about what is the topic that we are talking in that particular moment. So if we're talking about patterns or we're talking about metrics, there is a small title in the lower corner of the video, so you can move quickly to the video and locate topics that maybe you want to review. It's not perfect, but hopefully that helps you. Things that you can review. Please, as I mentioned before, do not memorize the answers. Guys, happen a lot. You memorize the exam, the quizzes, the midterm, and a small change, as I described in my example, is going to make you fail, not in one question, but in several. And think about it. A 70 or a 60 or a 50 in an exam that is 25% of your grade could be not a good idea. You have 2 days. Study for the exam. Do not use memorize or remember things that you think are going to be the same. Read carefully. Even though a question could look like similar to something that you already answered, check for the details. Just like in my example, the addition and the subtraction. The difference is just one line, but the answer is completely different. Be aware of that. Read carefully. You have plenty of time. Believe me, 75 minutes is just enough to answer all the questions and go back and review all of them, assuming that you have the knowledge that you need in order to answer. Otherwise, even if you have more time, it's the same, right? But if you study, if you have been here the previous 15 weeks, you're going to be able to finish the exam in less than the 75 minutes. And you're going to be able to review things. And you have time to read carefully the question and just be sure that you're answering correctly. We cannot give you partial credits for sending us an email with the correct answer after you submit your exam. Professor, I just submit my exam. I answer 2 plus 2 equals 5, but I am talking with my friends and I just figure out that I answered incorrectly, that the correct answer was 4. Too late. We need to grade what you submit. That is what is going to happen in this class and hopefully in all the others. So read careful. Whatever you submit is going to be your grade. Anyway, so another recommendation, another thing from our lecture 1, this slide was there, lecture 1. Today, that is our last lecture. I want to ask you for the same. Please, whatever is your grade, it's going to be fair. It's going to be using the same criteria for everyone. The same exams, the same assignments, calculations, and so on. Believe me, Canvas do the calculation, Excel do the calculations. Neither the TAs or myself are calculating your grades manually. We do not make any distinction about, oh, this is the grade for this student, this is the grade for that student. Excel calculates everything, and it's the same equation for everyone. And yes, in order to get A+, the code is 97. Yep, 97. So if you have 96.9999, if by any reason this is your final number, it's not the TA that is a bad person or the instructor that is a bad person. It's just the computer working, and the computer is going to say, okay, 96.999, this is an A, not an A+. That's it. Sending an email, professor, can you change my grade to A+? Why? If I apply a curve, that is going to happen for everyone. If there is a curve and I decide that, okay, this one is the highest grade, so this one is going to be A+, so that means adding some kind of extra points is not going to be only for this case, but it's going to be for everyone. Because maybe there is another case similar in the borderline of B and B+, or C's or whatever. If there is any increment in the grades, it's going to be something that we do for everyone, not for one particular specific case. So there is no reason for sending emails asking for a special treatment, for asking, change my grade. If there is something that we do, if there is a curve or similar thing, it's going to be for everyone, and you are going to be notified about it. If not, that is your grade, calculated by the computer, according with the rules that we define in the syllabus. So please. For your agenda, just remember, this is Arizona time. Some of you are not here in the state. So if by any chance you are outside, if by any chance you have a different time zone, just put your alarm or your calendar or whatever you need. And remember, you have an exam. It's not only arriving late to the lecture, but you have an exam. And if you arrive late, you have less time to complete your exam. You do not want that. Key ideas for your exam, please. Now you are familiar with this. You need to show your environment. Remember, your space, your room. There were some issues with some people. Some of you received an email from the TAs telling you that you were flagged for issues with your environment, for issues you talking with someone, for issues about you looking at other places, people talking with you, etc. If you receive an email like that, please be sure that for the final, that situation, whatever it was, do not repeat, because then you're going to be flagged for the second time, and well, you are risking a 0 in the exam. So read the recommendations and the rules for the exam. If you didn't do that before, there is a link that is going to open a link on Canvas, and be sure that if you were flagged before, do not be flagged again. You have a couple of days. Please check if you're going to be able to take the exam in your home, if your roommates are going to be able to give you time. You cannot talk during the exam. You cannot use anything that covers your face, your head, your ears. Check all the rules. And again, I am concerned for the people that was flagged before. This is the class in which more cases of flags did I have for some reason. So please, if was your case, double check everything. You do not want that to happen again. It's a closed book exam. You cannot use any material, any electronic device in your desktop, any book closed there or notebook, and obviously do not talking with people. Please, you do not want to have an academic integrity issue with your final exam. Take care of that. Scratch paper is something that you can use. It's okay. Remember, show to the camera your paper. It should be empty. Nothing printed, no recycled paper. It's going to be flagged. So empty paper, please. White paper, you show to the camera, you can use that. You do not need to send me by email a copy of whatever you write in the paper. We do not need that. You can destroy that. The only thing is at the beginning, you show the paper that there are nothing there. So you are not cheating in the exam, right? You are using the paper for just take notes or I don't know, whatever you need to do during the exam with paper. But closed book, remember, please. So references, just try to avoid this superprogrammer.com or whatever online sites you could use. Official references, the books, software engineering. This one is not for the class, but for background that you should have. And the two that we use here for the Agile, for the coding, and obviously the videos for the lectures are there. Anything that I share with you is recorded. You can go and review again, just to be sure that we understand what was the topic, or how to do something, how to calculate something, what is the definition for something. The books, the lectures, the slides, that's it. Anything that is different from these sources with whatever other source that you have 2 days to ask and to review if your source is correct or what is happening. But after the exam, appeals because superprogrammer.com says something different, nothing is going to happen. Topics. I put here a quick list of keywords that you should be able to define. Imagine a question in which we ask you, what is the meaning of? And you put whatever is here. If all the words in this list make sense, if you can provide a definition right now for any of them, if you can remember the lecture in which we use these words and what they are connected, that is a good starting point. Question number 1 in your exam for everyone, requirements. What is a requirement? And this time for the final, it could be an open question. What is a requirement? An open question. And we talk about this. What is a requirement? What is a story? User story. What is a story point? Statistically, several students get this correctly in the midterm, in which you have a multiple choice for the answers. But when we move to the final, and in the final you have these 3, any of these 3, one of them, open question, there are a lot of errors. So I am sharing with you what happened before, the statistics. Be sure to review and be sure to be able to define by yourselves what is a requirement, what is a user story, what is a story point, what is the difference between a story point and a user story, what is the difference between a user story and a requirement. A requirement is the same to the user story, yes or no, and so on. That kind of questions, hopefully right now I am just mentioning questions, like throwing them. Hopefully you are answering them by yourselves, like, oh, yes, no, this, that. If you are able to answer those questions right now, good, you're ready for the final. If not, if you're right now wondering what is a story point, what is the difference between story point and the user story, is a requirement the same to the user story? Yes, maybe, no, I do not remember. Those are things that you can go and review, because believe me, for sure, it's going to be there. Another thing that for sure is going to be there is a story, a user story. This is correct, yes or no. This is a user story or is an epic. Please, for the following problem, give me 2 or 3 user stories. We work a lot with user stories. And even in the final assignment, there are errors in user stories. I share with you feedback about user stories. There are 2 or 3 lectures in which we talk about this is wrong, this is correct. For your final, be sure that you can provide a good user story. Be sure that you can evaluate a story and check if that story is a story or not. Remember the invest and remember the things that you need to review. Remember how to know that the story is good or not. Be sure that you can do that. If you need help, the first thing that I will recommend, go back to the video in which we review all your assignments, all the critics that we did for the stories there, all the errors. If you remember what happened if we have an and there, what happened if we have an adjective like fast, beauty, and so on. Those things should be easy to remember, should be easy to identify. If you have a question, there is a story, and the story have the and, 2 or 3 things, you remember that that is an error. If there is a story, quotation marks, and there is something like fast, beautiful, friendly, you remember the issues with using adjectives. So if you review the material, it should be easy, quick to check this is wrong, or this cannot be, or the correct answer is this one or that one. If you forget, it's going to look like everything looks good, bad answer. Check that. Beyond that, remember, estimation, planning poker. I asked you about estimation, you did estimation, and my assumption is that you run at least 4 sprints. So these topics like estimation, planning poker, burden chart, is something that you have been doing. And again, for instance, if I show you examples of burden charts, we reviewed this in some lecture, you're going to be able to identify if a burden chart makes sense or not. Again, not the project, but the burden chart. Remember these ideas of the lines going up or changing things. I mean, instead of lines, bars, pie charts. Hopefully you can identify that all those things are not burden charts, and you can identify which one is the correct one. Again, you have been done these charts, so it should be easy to identify them. If not, if you have questions, check the book, ask to me, to the TAs. But for sure, this guy is going to be in your exam. We need to check that you know how to do them, that you understand them. I put these guys here because even though it's not something that we review here, but it's part of your prerequisites, software engineering, right? I put the book. I assume that you know what is a line of code, effective line of code, and cyclomatic complexity, particularly line of code and cyclomatic complexity, that you understand what is that you know how to calculate that for a source code. You are noticing those things in the tool that you're using for your homework, whatever it is. So be sure to remember that in your exam. If for any reason you're working with a team and your teammate is the one that is working with this, ask him to explain to you what these things are, what she or he is doing, because you're going to need to remember this in your exam. Your exam is individual, right? So I am assuming that all of you are working with the project, all of you are working with this. There are going to be questions in which these concepts can be mentioned, or you are going to be requested to do something involving these metrics. So take a look. Grooming, what is that? Hopefully you remember. Separation of concerns, dependence injection. I am going to show you examples of this, but those are concepts that are going to be there in your exam one way or another. In the next slide, I'll show you details, but things that, if you remember what is this separation of concerns, dependence injections, and if you remember how many times in the lecture we reviewed this, you are in the good path. Invest deep, product backlog item, dry, keys, coupling, cohesion, distance, abstractness, stability, CCR. Particularly this here. What is the difference between invest and deep? What is the difference between dry and keys? Is the same coupling and cohesion? What is the difference? Can you explain one or the other? Can you give me an example of whether or not a user story is invest or not? Is applying all the principles? Can you tell me what is the meaning of invest? Can you calculate the distance? Can you calculate abstractness? Can you calculate stability? Things that we did in the previous lecture, remember? All those things can be questions. So this is just kind of one picture with very important things to review. It's not comprehensive. I didn't put here everything that we have covered, but use a list of the words that I consider the most important. It's going to give you an A+? No, but it could help you to get at least 60, 70% of the exam moving forward. These are the most important concepts. Now, details about these concepts, things that we can review. Which one of these two? This is a question that maybe you have in a quiz. This is a question that maybe you have in your final. Can you help me with the answer? Two teams. Do we understand the diagrams? Do we understand what is the line? Do we understand what is the blue line here or the gray line here and the other things, right? Okay. It's a good team, the team A. Did they finish the project? Did they procrastinate or did they work early? Those are the kind of questions that you could have in the final. And again, it's used to show, for you to show that you understand the plot. Something happened here. This guy didn't finish. This one finished early. I think it's easy. And right now, I think most of you, usually the people that attend the lecture, when I compare the attendance with the grades, usually for the people that is here, I am confident that you are going to answer this correctly. I am showing this for the people that maybe watch the video later, hopefully. And well, usually some appeals come from these diagrams. Professor, I didn't understand which one of these was the project. I wasn't there. I believe that this, the gray one, was the project. So because the gray is use a line, the project looked perfect. Well, easy, right? So if I told you that this is 3 points in your final, it's a lot for a very easy question. No appeals, no problems, if you remember what it is, if you did this for your project. So hopefully that is the case. So yeah, A is the good one. Diagrams. I can reuse diagrams from you or from your classmates in previous semesters. So this one, for instance, this one is a good design, yes or no? And I am not asking for the fact that it's done on paper. It's just the design, good or bad? If bad, why? And you know what to evaluate, right? Well, going back to this one, the point here, the difference doesn't matter the story points, because remember, these are two teams, and the story points, well, they are particular to what the team decide to estimate. The only thing here that we can compare is this distance here or this distance here. So whatever happened with story points, the team A finished early. The only thing, the assumption here is two teams doing the same project, whatever is the evaluation. The first one finished the project, finished early, whatever estimation they did. The second one didn't finish, whatever estimation they did, but they didn't finish. So that is the thing that you notice in the plot. One finished early, the other didn't. They were doing the same project. The estimation, well, maybe this guy estimate 100 and these guys estimate 800, but it's the same work, it's the same project. For one team is more complex, for the other is easier. For this one they finished, this one didn't finish. That is the point. Good, okay. So going back to the design, good or bad? Hopefully you agree with me that it's bad, but the question is why? Exactly, you noticed this, right? We talk about the diamonds. And we have this, a lot of diamonds. Is a concern. We review this separation of concerns, we review dependency injection. And one of the first things that you're going to notice when you apply dependency injection, when you separate concerns, is it's not a good idea to have these global variables. Global variables in the class diagram, diamonds. The diamonds are, I do not want to tell you, and it's not the rule, that the diamonds are bad. They are not. They are attributes. You need attributes sometimes. The issue is when you have a lot of diamonds, there is a smell. There is something that could tell you, really, you need so many? And when those so many are in classes like this loop here, loops are a concern. And if you have a loop with diamonds, all those things are things that you need to review. Again, we cannot talk about errors. We talk about smells, red lights, things that do not look good, even though if we found a justification, maybe they are okay, but issues, the diamonds. We talk about the diamonds, we talk about these classes or whatever they are alone. We talk about the loops, all those things, issues with separation of concerns, issues with dependency injection. Again, I just put this quickly. I am going to give you more details later, but if you remember what I am talking about, if you remember what is this separation of concerns, what is this dependency injection, how they are related with the diamonds, why this is mentioning all of that, you are in a good path for the exam. If not, what I am mentioning is just topics that maybe you want to review before the exam. It's like, okay, diamonds, dependency injection, how they are connected, how they are related, what are you talking about? There is a full lecture about it. Yep, all that, classes disconnected, a bad idea. Okay, you get the point. Source code, you have this question in your main term, they are going to be there again for the final. Things that you did, things that I asked you to apply for your project. If I show you this source code, screenshot, clean, Yes or no? And this is the question, yes or no? And hopefully you agree with me that there is one and only one answer. It's not subjective. It's not like, for me, yes, but for you, no. There is one answer, because there are specific things that you know you should review. And there are specific things that you do, and that things give you the answer. So it's not subjective, but an objective evaluation. It's like, okay, you are asking me if this is clean or not. I need to remember what are the things that we need to review in order to know or to assess that this is clean or not. So maybe I should start with the items. Like, okay, this is clean or not? Oh, the first question is, which are the things that I need to review for evaluating clean code? And hopefully you remember that we talk about those three things. We talk about clean coding, and then we did, well, it's going to be keep it simple. It's going to be do not repeat yourself, and it's going to follow the readability rules. Readability, at least follow the rules for the language, follow the rules for the names, follow the rules for the indentation and things like that. So 3 things to review. If you review this, what do you think about dry? What do you think about keep it simple? Can you find anything here like it's not dry or it's not simple? I don't know, anything? Okay, very good point. The comments. Guys, something that I need to clarify with the comments, because just to be sure, we mentioned that the best source code is the source code that do not need comments. We mentioned, and something that you know, is it is better that the source code explain itself. It is better that your source code is able to describe what is happening without comments. That is true. That is one thing that we mentioned. Something that I want you to notice here is the comments that we're showing is Javadoc. And Javadoc are very special, very particular kind of comments. Question, what is the goal of the Javadoc comments? Yes. I mean, they are comments, but yes, they are Javadoc comments. What make the Javadoc comments special? Why we identify this? Oh, they are Javadoc comments. And therefore, these guys do not have any problem with these 2 things. Okay, I am going to talk about that, the variables, yes, but let me finish with the comments. The Javadoc comments are not for the developer, right? The Javadoc comments are not there to explain to you as a developer what the method is doing or what the class is doing. The Javadoc comments are the ones that you're going to use to create these HTML pages, well, in Java, in which you describe the API, in which you describe the interface for the particular class that you are developing, remember? That one is going to help. Not exactly the IDE, but the IDE is going to use it, but it's going to help other developers to use your class. The important thing here is you, as a developer, if you are going to use this library in order to integrate machine learning in your software that you are creating right now, you are doing a Java desktop application, and in your Java desktop application, you are doing something that is going to use machine learning. And therefore, you are going to use this library that is going to help you to create neural networks. Are you going to read the source code of the library? Or are you going to read the Javadoc, the API documentation in these HTML pages? But those HTML pages, the ones that you read when you are searching for a library and reading about the methods of the library, Those are Java docs in the code. The Java doc is something that you use to create those documentations. So you do not read the source code. You read the documentation. You can read the source code if you have access to that, if that is open source. But it's one or the other. So when you have an explanation in Java doc, that explanation is not a problem like repeating something, because this explanation is there to create a documentation for a developer that could use this program, this API, this class, and that guy do not need to read the source code. That is what we usually do when we use a library, right? I mean, how many of us read the documentation for the library, the class, how many methods are there, the parameters for the constructors, and so on, in an HTML page created with Javadoc, and we do not go and read the source code about what is happening. So Javadoc is okay. This idea of a source code is better without a comment is more about comments, like what is happening in this line, or comments about description of the algorithm inside of the code. The Javadoc is something that we need. If we're creating these libraries, APIs, if we're thinking about our software is going to be reused by another team, by another developer. Good, so no issues with Javadoc. Javadoc is special. Javadoc do not follow the same criteria of the other comments. Javadoc is in order to document the API, in order to document this code for external reuse. So that is good. Hopefully clear. Now, going into the details, who need Javadocs? Usually we put Javadocs in the following. Number one, to the class here. You notice that it's the line 11. So the class needs Javadoc because it's the thing that is going to be the description of the class in the HTML page. And second, the public methods. Any method that is public is part of the interface of the class, is something that someone else can use. Those public methods need Javadoc. And that includes the constructors and getters, setters to string and so on. The methods that you usually found in the API documentation. Any method that is private, you can forget the Javadoc because that private method is not going to be part of that API documentation. It's up to you. You can just document all your methods for your source code to look like standard, but there is no need for Javadoc in a method that is private. Thinking about this, you can ignore the Javadoc. The Javadoc is not an issue. It's not an issue for this. We can talk about readability in a different point, but for dry, keys, and clean, the Javadoc, they are comments. They can be telling me the same story that the code, but it's for different people, for different population, for the developer, for the reader. Those can be okay. What else? Anything here that you think is extra that you could eliminate and still the code will do the same work? Anything. Yes, I agree with that. Oh, it's a private message, but that is the kind of one thing there. Don't worry, your exam is not going to be like this, so tricky. I am using this just to have this conversation with you right now. But one thing, yes, this is the thing. The only thing that you can notice here, like different to the standard thing, because this source code is something that maybe your IDE create automatically. It's nothing special here. It's a class with a constructor, getter, etc. Nothing new, nothing crazy. The only thing that we did, line 25, this super. Maybe you didn't notice at the beginning, but now that I point out the super, do we need the super? When we need the super? This case is one of those cases in which we need a super. Can you answer that? Yes, those two things. Number one, usually super is connected with this idea of passing parameters to the panel, right? So usually when you use super, there is something there. In this case, there is nothing. It's not a compilation error. Finally, what I am doing is to call the default constructor, the empty constructor in the parent class. But what could be the reason to call that default constructor in the parent class? Moreover, there is no parent class. Well, we know that all the classes are connected with object in Java. Why do I need to call the constructor in object? And when you ask those questions, we do not have an answer that is kind of convincing, there is no reason. Moreover, if I delete this line, something is going to happen here. If I delete that line and I recompile this code together with the other classes in this project, probably nothing is going to change, nothing is going to happen, because that super is garbage. That is my only problem here. The other question, that problem, the super, is a problem of readability, is a problem of keep it simple, or is a problem of dry? Keep it simple. Did you notice the kind of questions that you can have? It's like, okay, why super is going to be a problem with readability? Super is a keyword. It's nothing that I put a name there. Why is going to be a problem with repeating things? Oh, keep it simple. Yeah, because you can put the super, it's not going to be a compilation problem. It's going to work. You can put super parentheses to all your classes and all your constructors. Why? Just to make the software longer and more fancy? That is a problem. So things like that, guys. There are going to be examples that are correct, and I am going to be asking for you to identify errors. Be careful, not everything have errors, but obviously there are going to be examples like the one in your quizzes and your midterm that they have errors. So I think you are familiar with those that have errors. I just want to point out not everything have errors. There are going to be questions in which this is correct or not, this is clean or not, this is simple, this is dry, and the answer could be yes. Good. Now, topics, more in detail. Not a comprehensive list, so probably you need to review more. Agile process. I give you this summary of the key ideas. Again, I am thinking about 60% of your exam. If you do not have time to review everything, but at least you can review and ask yourself about these topics. Here are the topics, the titles. They correspond to a particular lecture. We review this topic in one lecture, some of them in more than one. But if you need to review any of this, if you do not have a clear idea about all these things, you can search for the lecture, or I am giving you the reference in the book. The number is the chapter, so the chapters in the book. If you prefer the book, go ahead. If you want to review the video and the slides, go ahead. Do not go to the super programmer tutorial, please. That is my only request. The book, the lectures, any question, let us know. Most of this, I didn't put a specific question because these are the topics that we can use, we are going to use for the theoretical questions. And you can imagine, again, this was one question in your midterm. For some of you, for most of you, you can expect the question, people factors, again, for the final. If you get it correctly, great. If not, be sure to go and review. There is a lecture, one slide with those data. The Agile principles, there is a list with that, items. Be sure to review it, and well, the difference between these two, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. All of those things, it uses a list for you to review and more. Again, the references, and when there is a word lecture, there is a video about this. You choose what do you want to review. Other than that, and this is kind of the first part, the midterm, moving from the midterm, the things that we review after the midterm, a few of them, but more practical, is number one, about design, clean design. We review the rules. We review the rules and principles that are a good idea. Do you remember that one good idea when you are designing a system, when you are starting with this big picture, is think about the test cases. Think about what are you going to do to test this thing. Hopefully you remember that that was the first principle that we reviewed. The question is, why? Why is it important to think about the test cases? And I am not talking about test driving, developing. I am not only talking about this. I am talking about in general, in the agile process methodology. When you are planning, what are you going to do in your sprint? When you are defining your PBIs, why in some point we talk about thinking about the test cases is important. What do you get from thinking about those things? Do you remember? One of them, separation of concerns. Why? Why the fact that I think about the testing is going to help me to separate concerns? Well, that is the goal of testing in general, right? Check for breaking the source code. Thinking about the testing when you are doing the planning, because remember, here we are talking about this, starting the sprint, planning what to do, the priority of the task, the planning, the task, our design, and then from the design to the programming. Thinking about the testing is going to help you to do exactly. When you think about the testing, I am not telling you to define your test cases at the beginning. Again, I am not talking about TDD. Just thinking about what are you going to do to test the system is going to help you to notice that two components, in order to be tested, need to be together, and therefore they are coupled. And that is not good. The good thing is the coupling. The good thing is separate concerns. So if you think about the testing, that is going to help you to kind of identify these problems in which, okay, in order to review that, we need to put them together. Okay, if we need them together, they are coupled. Can we do something in order to separate them? What is the easy way to separate things? Not the easy way, but one way to separate things. What is one approach for the coupling? At least one that we review. Yes, thank you. Dependency injection. Can you explain to me in plain English what is dependency injection? Because it's a very fancy term, but what does it mean in terms of programming? I am a programmer. What is that dependency injection? Yeah, but that is a good point. Using an instance of another class inside of a method, yes, and something else, something very important. Do I create that instance inside of the method, or Yes. That is the concept, right? Is dependency injection. If you want to think about a parameter, usually that is a fancy name for passing a parameter. You're going to do something, you need something. Instead of create that something, you're going to get that something from a different place, maybe as a parameter, dependency injection. Yeah. Is a parameter is something that you're going to receive, whether or not you store that parameter in a global variable, like I receive the parameter in the constructor and that constructor store the parameter in a variable and then the other method can use it. That is a different story. But the point is the value for that something comes from another place. What I do with that store, use, different story. Maybe I can inherit that to the children of this class, but the value comes from another place. And that is what we call this dependency injection. And that is a very good way to do the coupling. Do you remember? Instead of having one class as an owner of something that is also an owner of something else, all those downs, something that we review is, you know what? Call the method, send a parameter, call the method, send a parameter. We can avoid the downs. Moreover, instead of having this sequence of connections, we can have this starts, the center connected with things, good practices. Again, dependency injection, coupling, cohesion, things that we review. We do not go deep in terms of software design. We do not review all the details about this as class diagrams. It's not our goal, but at least the concept of dependency injection, separation of concerns, and this cohesion coupling things. Yeah, different story. Here I am considering just calling the method, that's it. I am not storing globally the value. You do not need to do that. Dependency injection is just passing the parameter. What you do inside is a different story. Good. Yeah, that is the reason here. So, good. The last thing that we review, minimize items. Remember that we talk about this, fewer classes, fewer relationship, the better. But it's the principle number 4. The goal is not having one class with one main method and that's it. However, if you have 2 solutions and one have 4 classes and the other have 5, probably the one with 4 could be better, assuming that all the other principles have been applied. So is the 4 item, less items, the better, classes, relationships, but it's the last one. First, we need to review the previous ones. And this is something that you notice with the use of patterns. Again, it's not the core topic here, but when you use patterns, you are adding more classes and maybe 1 or 2 more connections. But it's a good practice. Yeah, because patterns help you with the previous things, expressiveness in particular, and simplicity also. So this one is just the last thing to review. Fewer items, the better. If you have 2 solutions and both cover the previous things. Something that we talk about it, important to notice. Talking about patterns could be a good idea for you to remember observer, delegate, factory. Full things, we reviewed this quickly in one lecture. I am not going to ask you for particularities about the patterns. However, they can help you to identify dependency injection, separation of concerns. It's a good idea for you to review that lecture in which we review patterns, mostly if you are not familiar with patterns from a background, from a previous class. If you are, well, you remember what we talked about it. But if not, please, if you do not have background in software engineering, if you do not know what I am talking about regarding patterns, take a look at least to these 3. There is a lecture in which we talk about a few of them quickly, but probably if you do not have the background, you will need to review a little bit more. So check the class diagram, check the source code, is a good thing to do. Structure. The last thing that we review, a lot of questions in your exam. For sure, all of you are going to have these kind of questions regarding the metrics that we have been reviewing in the previous weeks. So please be sure that you are able to calculate this distance, instability, and abstraction for classes and for packages. You are doing that in your project. Could be a great idea to finish that before the exam, at least to have clear how to calculate those metrics, what is the meaning of the numbers, because the question could be calculate the numbers, but also could be tell me if the number is good or bad. And you need to remember what is the meaning of good or bad. Which is the value that is good, which is the value that is bad. Bad because useless, bad because pain zone. What is this distance? What happens if the distance is 0 or -1 or 1? Abstractness in 0 or in 1. The combination of abstractness with stability. The plot that I asked you to do, the plots that we review with several projects. Be sure to review that and understand what is the meaning of the different combinations. They help you to evaluate coupling, separation of concerns, dependency injections, in particular, things that I am going to put there. Again, there is dependency injection here, yes or no? And it's a 3-point question, really too easy. Yes or no? Dependency injection in A, yes or no? Dependency injection in B, yes or no? And I think if you listen what I described previously, you have the correct answer, right? Okay, 1 no, 1 yes. Notice, it's just a yes or no. And it's not subjective, it's really, the A is no, period. There is no partial credit. There is not, for me, yes, but for you, no. It's just no. And the second one is yes, dependency injection, parameters. There are parameters, no parameters. Those are the kind of things that I want you to review before the exam. Good. Okay. So questions that I asked you before, and you remember which one is better, A or B, similar. There is only one correct question, right? And you just helped me before with the diamond, so I do not need to explain good, better. We reviewed this using the metrics, the AI, which one of these is better. There is a video in which I explain you that the B is the better, remember, with numbers. And again, it's not subjective, it's not I like more the A or my friend like more the B. We agree that it's B. And if you do not remember why, or you do not agree that B is better, will be it. And this is an example in which you notice B is better, even though we have more packages, more elements. Having less elements is the last item, the last rule. And there are other things that are more important than having less elements. In this case, something very, very important is happening there. It's related with the metric, remember, dependency. So B is better, even though have more elements. Again, a full video about it. Please, if you need it, review it. Well, the same. Concrete classes, all classes are concrete. If you can create an object, it's a concrete class. If not, like the interfaces or the abstract classes, abstractness is 1 for the concrete classes, abstractness 0. The rule usually is, can you use that name for the new? Not for the variable reference, but for the new. Can you create an object? If you can create the object, it's a concrete class, and you know it's not abstract. When you have an interface, you can use the interface to create the variable, but you cannot use the interface to do the equal, new, and the name of the interface, right? So that is kind of the rule that you can follow. Doesn't matter if the class is internal or external. So that is the rule. Closing things, all these rules, be sure that you are able to calculate them for a source code or for a class diagram, depending of the case. And the last thing, do we remember the stable dependency principle? And do we remember the stable abstraction principle? If I have a class and this class have abstraction 1 and I have another, and I create a connection, like I have a variable here, there, according with the stable dependency principle, according with this guy, this is scenario A, B, good or bad? What is the principle telling me? Okay, I have one good and I have one direct message red light. So I have one happy face and I have one worry face. So I need more answers. And that's the scenario, good or bad. And you can use icons or text. Okay, now I have why is bad. Exactly. So abstraction should terminate with a greater value. Question in your exam, something like this, the answer for that one, but why? Because remember, this one is an arrow that is going in that direction, and the SDP is telling you that the arrow, the connection, whatever it is, it doesn't matter, inheritance, composition, whatever, should start in something that have an abstraction level that is low, small, than the one to which you are pointing. So this example is not the case, it's 1 to 0. This example is this abstract class maybe that have a variable and that variable is from another class. No good idea. These are the kind of questions that you can have. And again, this is a 1 to 3 points, depending on your exam. But this 1 point or 3 points, used to tell me good or bad, is 2 options, multiple choice. Think about your answers, and it's just yes or no, and that is going to give you, again, 3 points, 1 point, depending on the particular question, the complexity of the diagram. But those are the kind of things that you're going to be doing. So you can review this later. Question in your exam, this one, good or bad, for instance, or you can select any of them. Remember the questions, this one, how to calculate abstraction. Another example, this one here is good or is bad. Here, more complex scenario, this package at the center is good or is bad. Where that package, this one at the center, is here. Can you give me the coordinates for that package in that 2D scenario? Those are the questions. So I am going to post these slides. You can play with this, but more or less the kind of diagrams, the kind of questions that can be there in your exam. Okay, guys, any question? Very good question. No, I am not going to ask you to upload files during the exam. That is not going to happen. Question like this, I am not going to ask you to draw the plot or draw things. Worst case scenario, I am going to ask you for the coordinates. The coordinates, the value here and the value here. Or I am going to ask you, hey, is in the paint zone? Yes, no. Is in the useless zone? Yes, no. Or I am going to ask you for what is the value for the distance. So it's a similar idea, but without asking you to draw anything. Good. Quiz 6, we are reviewing individual cases. Some of you probably are going to receive emails from the TAs. They are working. I mentioned this to someone. We are reviewing whether or not you were present during the lecture. So you read the instructions. We're reviewing at what time did you log for the first time to Canvas and so on. Individual cases, individual situations. The TAs are helping me to handle most of them. And I am reviewing special cases that the TAs forward to me. No calculators. Because it's an electronic device, because you're going to be flagged for a problem, you do not need to do the numbers like that. You can just play with fractions and maybe just be aware that 1 divided by 5 or 3 divided by 100, if you have an idea of fractions, you are okay with that. You do not need to transform those in decimal numbers. So I don't see a need for a calculator. Okay, so I stop here. Thank you, guys. Good luck with your exam.